You know, when it comes to high-stakes diplomacy, sometimes you're just one wrong move away from the edge. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly tense standoff between the US and Iran, a situation so volatile it literally has the entire world holding its breath. I mean, just a few days ago, it really felt like there was a glimmer of hope, a real potential breakthrough, in a standoff that's been going on for decades. Seemed like it was right there, within reach. But, well, that hope didn't last long. So what happened? Seriously? What went wrong? How do we go from this historic meeting to the threat of a full-blown war in just a matter of hours? Okay, let's break it down. Let's really dig into this sudden and, frankly, really dangerous escalation. Yeah, the whole situation just turned on a dime. I mean, literally hours after those high-level peace talks wrapped up, President Trump announced a full naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about cutting off all of Iran's maritime shipments, a huge move. Okay, so let's be super clear about what this actually means. A naval blockade. This isn't just another sanction. It's not some political chess move. Under international law, this is considered an act of war. And it's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. That's one of the most critical choke points on the planet, where something like a fifth of the world's oil passes through. So this one decision, wow, it could absolutely trigger a much, much wider conflict. So you gotta ask, what's the end game here? Well, the US is basically gambling. They're going all in on this strategy of maximum pressure, trying to force Iran's hand to accept their terms. But Iran, they're not backing down. They're threatening to hit back at American military assets in the Gulf. It's a classic, high-stakes game of chicken, and things are incredibly tense. You know, to really get how we got here, to this crisis point, we've got to rewind the clock just a few days. Let's go back to that moment of, believe it or not, incredible optimism. Let's look at the historic meeting that actually offered a bit of hope. And this really was one for the history books. Think about it. For the first time in 47 years, yeah, since the Iranian Revolution back in 1979, high-level officials from the United States and Iran actually sat down in the same room. This was in Islamabad, a face-to-face meeting, the first of its kind in nearly half a century. That's a huge deal. And look, this wasn't just some quick photo op for the cameras. They were in there talking for 21 hours. A marathon, 21 hours. When you hear a number like that, it tells you these were dead serious, substantive discussions. They were really getting into the weeds on a huge range of issues. All right, so here's the key takeaway. While no, they didn't sign a final deal, the ice was definitely broken. A real channel for communication was opened up. And most importantly, the door was left open for more talks. There was a path forward, a fragile one for sure, but it was there. And that's the path that this blockade now puts in serious jeopardy. So if the talks were that substantive, what happened? What were the real sticking points that created this deadlock and stopped them from reaching a formal agreement? Well, it really boiled down to two massive disagreements. First up, Iran's nuclear program. This has been a source of tension for, over 2 decades now? The U.S. came in with a hard line, a 20-year ban on enrichment and demanding Iran hand over all its enriched uranium. Iran's position? They insisted on their right to enrich for peaceful purposes under international treaties, but they said they were open to negotiating. The other big one was the Strait of Hormuz. Iran sees it as a key part of its national security. The U.S. wanted free passage for all ships, but Iran just wasn't willing to give up its control over such a strategic spot. And this is where things get really, really messy. Just before these talks even started, President Trump made this claim that American and Israeli bombings had already destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities. So you can imagine, this created a huge contradiction when U.S. negotiators turned around and demanded that Iran dismantle those exact same facilities. So from Iran's point of view, you've got this major contradiction, plus what they felt was a rigid take-it-or-leave-it attitude from the Americans. It all added up to what they called a deep trust deficit. And in the end, that gap, that lack of trust, was just too wide to bridge in this first round of talks. Of course, this American blockade didn't just happen in a vacuum. The announcement sent immediate shockwaves all around the world, and the international reaction was, well, it was swift and it was widespread. Take China, for instance. They're the single biggest buyer of Iranian oil, and they immediately called the move irresponsible and dangerous. President Xi Jinping's statement about not reverting to the law of the jungle, that's a really clear signal that they see this kind of unilateral action as a direct threat to global stability. And the diplomatic fallout was immediate and just so stark. Israel was pretty much the only country to publicly back the blockade. Meanwhile, you have key U.S. allies like France and Britain scrambling for de-escalation, even calling for a 40-nation summit. The overwhelming global reaction was just really critical, and it left the U.S. looking more and more isolated on the world stage. Okay, so with tensions sky high and the whole world on edge, you have to wonder, is there any way back from the brink? Is there any chance at all to return to diplomacy? And unbelievably, the answer seems to be maybe. Yeah. Despite this aggressive blockade, there are reports that back-channel discussions are already happening to get the talks going again. And Pakistan, which, shares a border with Iran but also has security ties with the US, is in this really unique position to be a mediator that both sides seem to trust. They're working hard to keep those lines of communication open. And then, in what is a pretty surprising twist, President Trump himself seemed to crack the door back open to diplomacy. Just yesterday, he made a statement hinting that a return to the negotiating table, probably in Pakistan, could happen within the next couple of days. And so, here we are. The world is watching, waiting. The next move is absolutely critical. Is it going to be a step back to the negotiating table in Pakistan, trying to revive that fragile hope for peace? Or is it going to be a military confrontation in the Strait of Hormuz, with consequences that could ripple across the entire globe? The choice between diplomacy and conflict, it's never been more stark.